Hey y'all, welcome to Veggie Farming. I'm Stacy, and one of the first lessons I learned in the garden was timing. And this season, my timing has been completely thrown off. Looking around this garden house, you can see all of my seedlings that I brought outside to harden off, and they look a mess. Overgrown, yellowing leaves, and all of them need some fertilizer at this point. They should have been planted a long time ago. I started all of these plants from seed indoors, probably too early because I knew I was making changes in the garden and I didn't know exactly how long that would take. But my seeds had germinated and started growing, and so I just went with it, knowing I didn't have a place for everything yet. So they all have just been waiting. One good thing is that I usually overplant, so I have more than I need, and I'm just going to figure out which ones are the healthiest and get those planted. I'm going to take y'all on the journey of getting everything planted and then show you how they look about 4 weeks later. After the soil was delivered for the new garden house beds, that's when I started to tackle the new problem I had. As gardeners, we pride ourselves on our nice, healthy soil, and that can actually take years to build. So I always hate when I have to buy new soil. But this soil was really bad. It had so many sticks and leaves that were not broken down that I already knew that this was going to be another battle this season. It was so bad that I didn't feel comfortable planting in it without removing some of the larger pieces. So my plan was to sift the first couple of inches of soil. I tried all kind of homemade sifters, and they all required a lot of shaking, and that was just making me dizzy. So eventually I gave up on that and found a rotary sifter on Amazon, and that actually turned out to be a lifesaver. Once the sifting was done, then I still had this large pile of soil that I had taken out of my old raised beds that had all of the soil I had been taking care of for years. So I definitely wanted to add it to the top layer of the new beds. Now this video just shows you a small clip of the work that I did, but I worked on this sifting and filling the beds every day after work and on the weekends until dark most days for a couple of weeks. So gardening can be peaceful and rewarding, but it is most definitely work also. I put down a layer of alfalfa pellets and some granular fertilizer and mixed all of that into the top layers of the soil. And finally, after all of that was done, I could start planting my seedlings. What we're doing now is just determining which ones will be planted and which ones will not. So whichever ones look the most healthy, those are the ones that are going to be salvaged and planted. I did have a few brassicas in here, some kale. I planted this when I thought I was going to have enough time to get it in at the end of spring before it started getting too hot. So I don't know if I want to baby these along or not. Okay, that's what today is. This is my trusty square foot gardening template, just to get an idea of how much room I'm gonna have here, and then I just outline it. This whole back row here is going to be peppers, so I just traced it out so I'll have an idea of how many plants I can put in here. And right now I'm still just laying things out. And so I'll lay it out and just kind of bury the cups so I can get an idea of what it looks like. All right, I'll bring you back when I get a little bit further along. And this is, of course, my drip irrigation. I haven't finished setting it up yet. I think I'm gonna just plant and I'll go back and get my drip line set up a little later. Okay. Oh, let me show you the peppers that need to be narrowed down. So I'm doing this one for sure, but these are the rest that need to be narrowed down. The thing about my peppers is anything I don't plant in this bed, I usually end up sticking in my green stalk. So I probably won't be getting rid of as many of those as I will the extra tomato plants. All right, back to selecting. I'm planting the tomatoes close together because this year I'm planting all dwarf and determinate varieties of tomatoes. So I expect the plants to be smaller than the indeterminate tomatoes that I normally grow. This first tomato is called a Mr. Snow. I'm going to bury this deep since I've already had to take off some of the lower leaves that weren't healthy. But since they are smaller varieties, I don't expect to have to do as much pruning this season. I'm looking forward to seeing how well these smaller tomato plants grow for me. I'm adding bone meal and starter fertilizer to each of the planting holes. I'm thinking this new soil may need extra fertilizer this year since the lower layers still have a lot of larger pieces that are breaking down and might possibly tie up some of the nutrients. I'll be watching these plants for any changes that might show that they need more fertilizer this season. This year I placed a garden bed under my squash trellis and I'm focusing on two plants, Seminole pumpkins and tromboncino squash. Both are supposed to be more resistant to the squash vine borer, and both have fruit that can be stored for longer once they're fully matured. I started these plants a little later than everything else because I knew they would grow quicker, but they still have been in the container a little too long. I'm planting them and hoping for the best. Probably overplanting the area, but the plants are alive, so I'm going to plant them, and if I need to thin them later, I will. Maybe. Last year, the squash vine borer got 3 different rounds of squash that I planted at 3 different times. So I'm going to give it one try this season and see if I can get anything. If not, I'm moving on to another plant. My plan is to have the plants on the outer edge vine up the trellis, so in the middle I made room to plant soybeans. This is my first time growing soybeans, and I'm trying 2 different varieties. I haven't extended my drip irrigation into this area, so I mulched it all in and I'll be hand watering this bed throughout the season. These squash plants are almost completely yellow, and I'm still giving them a chance. They're a summer squash called Smooth Criminal. They're made for smaller spaces because instead of sprawling out, they grow upright. So you can stake them and they just continue to grow upward. I don't really have enough room in this bed for that, but they won't sprawl, so I'm just going to pack them in and get as much as I can from them. I'll be covering these to protect them from the squash vine borer and rodents. So if no flying insects get into pollinate it, I'll have to hand pollinate if I come across a flower. This day I just so happened to catch a male flower and a female flower that was still slightly open, so I went ahead and used the male flower to pollinate. I see that these flowers are full of ants, and I already have 1 or 2 squash that look like they're growing on here. So ants or some other flying insects may have gotten into this bed and done some pollination already. This flower patch is completely overgrown. I planted some violas in the ground last fall and the weeds have just taken over. So I'm going to start fresh and pull everything out. These zinnias that I started from seed are completely overgrown. All of the leaves on the bottom are gone because I took them all off. They were starting to look diseased and I just wanted to give them a fresh start before planting them. I'm going to get some smaller flowers to help cover up some of the empty stems left on the zinnias. I use these little plant stakes to block off the area. It really just keeps the water hose from knocking down the plants when I drag it across the yard, and it works as a barrier to keep me from stepping into this flower bed. This is the fertilizer I used on everything once I got it in the ground. It's called Agro Thrive Fruit and Flower. The plants were struggling, so they needed a liquid fertilizer to really just give them a jump start. I've been wanting to try this fertilizer out, but it takes 4 ounces per gallon. So at that rate, it's going to use up this small container quickly, and it's really not cheap. So after finishing this bottle, I'm going back to 511 and more bloom. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for a full garden tour coming soon.